Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak. I'm Chair of the City County Planning Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the October 13th meeting. Would you please join me in standing the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Before we get into our business today, I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Scipio for being here. I don't see any other council members. If there's any other council member here. All right. We have a special acknowledgement today, kind of bittersweet. We are going to recognize someone who has served the planning board for a long time, and her knowledge and expertise will sorely be missed. But I'm going to ask Melinda Dunnigan if she would please come forward. And I'm going to ask Ms. Smith if you would
If you have any questions, you'll have to wait.
You've got 12 minutes.
A resolution honoring Melinda Dunnigan for her service as a member of the City County Planning Board. Whereas the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and the Board of Commissioners of Forsyth County, North Carolina, appointed Melinda Dunnigan to serve on the City County Planning Board, and whereas Melinda Dunnigan served the citizens of Forsyth County and Winston-Salem as a member of the City County Planning Board from August 2014 to September 2022, serving as a vice chair from July 2019 to September 22. And whereas her experience as a member of the Grassy Creek Alliance, member of the North Suburban Area Plan Citizen Advisory Committee, and member of the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance has contributed to her awareness and the impact of planning decisions on community residents. And whereas Melinda Dunnigan recommended development proposals, plans, and policies which improve the livability of Forsyth County and resulted in commercial and industrial development being more compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. And whereas Melinda Dunnigan served as a planning board liaison for the North Central Winston-Salem Area Plan Update, the South Suburban Area Plan Update, and the Southwest Winston-Salem Area Plan Update. And whereas she invested time and energy to thoughtfully understand and consider each item presented to the planning board for consideration during her tenure, and whereas she consistently respected various points of view on matters being considered by the board, whether expressed by members of the public, staff, or fellow board members. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Melinda Dunnigan is recognized for her volunteer service to the community through her membership on the City County Planning Board. We extend sincere appreciation to her for that service and wish her health and happiness in her future endeavors. Be it further resolved that this resolution be made a part of the public record and a copy of this resolution be furnished to Melinda Dunnigan.
Since you're there, would you like to make some remarks first?
I would. And we've all kind of talked about how we have appreciated Melinda's hard work these years and her ability to and willingness to ask questions and dig deeper, look at all the different points of view, ask questions of things that sometimes were general knowledge. I think sometimes they were asked for the benefit of everybody to know, that not necessarily she didn't understand, but she wanted everybody to know what the differences were, what was being considered with that. So it's been a real pleasure and honor for me to work beside her in her tenure here, and we wish her the best of luck. Thanks.
Melinda, I want to thank you personally for your formidable advocacy for all of our neighborhoods, all of our residents here in Winston-Salem, and also the careful, sensitive, astute consideration and attention to the matters that we were always looking at. You always came better prepared than anyone else on the board. I think we can all agree with that unanimously. And we really appreciate the intelligence and thoughtfulness and sensitivity you brought to it. Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Linda, thank you a lot for particularly your meticulous reading of the information that was provided to you and your depth of knowledge in terms of the different codes that were there as you've gone through it for many years. And I know that you have been following the planning board for over 20 years in this process. And I don't know if the other board members know that, but every single agenda she has looked at, read, and gone over for over 20 years. And particularly, I want to thank you for listening to neighborhoods as they express their concerns through you and others, and being able to act on that as you made your decisions. Thank you.
So I'll just echo, there's not much I can add that hasn't already been said, but Melinda, your level of preparation and attention to detail just often boggled my mind, because you would ask questions that as soon as I heard you ask them, I'd looked at the same materials and had not sort of seen some of the angles that you went at questions with. And whoever said that often asking questions to help educate everyone about the process, I think we will sorely miss, and really appreciate that and all you've done for us as a board.
And as a rather new member of this board, I will say you are always welcome to return and continue asking those intelligent, passionate questions. And I would like to thank you for bringing the shyness out of me, so I don't hesitate to ask questions going forward.
Anyone else from the board?
Just thank you for all your years of service. As someone coming from the planning department, you always were inquisitive. You brought new perspectives, and it's nice to work. It has been nice to work with you on this side of the table, and wish you the best in future endeavors.
Councilmember Scipio, would you like to make any remarks to Melinda? I don't want to overlook you. I'll get in trouble later if I do, so.
I didn't have any planned remarks, but since you've asked me, Ms. Dunnigan, I can tell you, since I've been on the council and I've been coming to these meetings, you have been the rock star that I have looked to, because you have not ever let anything go by that residents should be asking that you didn't bring to the table. And it's been just a wonderful thing to see you at work. You just make us all have more courage to stand for what's right and to speak the truth and to ask those hard questions. So I want you men particularly to take note. She's already set the standard that you're supposed to abide by and ask those hard questions. Don't be shy. And we just love people like you in our city, because you give from the heart. It's the residents who really make our city a wonderful place to live, and I thank you so much. And if we can play together later on at some point, don't hesitate to call me. I like to play.
Melinda, again, from the board, I'd like to thank you for serving as vice chair, and that means a lot. But I think the one thing, you've made the board better, just with your thoughtfulness, your preparation, as everyone has said. But also, I think the citizens in our community felt heard because of your voice. And sometimes we have to speak for those who have no voice, and you always made sure that you did. So thank you from my mouth, from the board, from the staff. We really thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to you for comments.
Well, thank you, Chris. And, I have come at this from a certain perspective, which was the neighborhood, the citizens' voice. However, I feel like I have broadened my perspective on the board, and it's from interacting with the rest of you. I feel like I do have a deeper understanding of all sides of an issue, which I probably didn't have when I first came to the board. So I really have learned and grown from this experience. I very much appreciate all of you. And I also very much appreciate the staff. And I can see now how difficult your job is, both Chris and Kirk, balancing everybody's interests, and you do a very good job of it. So I appreciate you as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
You are free to stay, or you may go. See, she grabbed her purse. That means she's leaving. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the planning board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the requests. Before addressing the planning board today, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the September 8th and September 22nd meetings. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
There's a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous. Thank you. Now I'm going to call on Mr. Brian Wilson to review the consent agenda. Welcome, Brian. It's good to see you there now.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our first consent agenda item case for tonight is item B2. That's case W3547. That has been automatically continued to your November 10th hearing date. Second consent agenda item is item B1. That's rezoning case W3546, commonly known as the Sunshine Village Development. They have actually requested to withdraw that item. They were kind of running out of time. I'm sure may be aware the board does required to present a rezoning report to the elected body within a certain amount of time. There's a large number of development considerations with this one, as you probably are aware. So they're going to withdraw this, request to withdraw this. It was outside of the automatic withdrawal request, so you will need to vote on approving that. Be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve of the petitioner's request to withdraw.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
All right, the next item will be item B3. That's case W3548. Petitioner is Jessica Vasquez. The request is to rezone the property from highway business HB to RS7. It's approximately 0.67 acre site located on the northwest corner of Akron Drive and Harwood Street. It's relatively close to the airport in that industrially zoned property there. The property currently contains 2 existing single-family homes. Single-family homes are actually not necessarily allowed in the HB district. Those homes were there before that zoning was in place. The lots also, it's actually one contiguous lot. If they wanted to subdivide that, they cannot subdivide that lot with the existing dimensional requirements in the HB district. It's a pretty large 20,000 square foot minimum lot size, so they couldn't subdivide that and have those as individual single-family homes. The new district is more consistent with the existing land use pattern to the north of the existing neighborhood, and staff does feel that it would prevent higher intensity commercial encroachment into that neighborhood. The request is consistent with area plan and legacy. Staff does recommend approval of this request.
No one has signed up. Yes.
Mr. Wilson, I looked in the staff comments, and I didn't see a history on the HB zoning. What's a,
It was in place when zoning was in place in 1968, I
so,
believe.
so they just decided it was HB when the zoning was founded? You found no records?
That's the best that we can figure out. And also keep in mind that whenever the old zoning maps were done, they were done on 400 scale tax maps. Again, I don't think it was a mistake, but yeah, it's always been residential, but there is no history of it changing from residential to commercial. So the use has been residential, but the zoning's been commercial, if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, knowing that neighborhood and the people that lived in it, I'm surprised it was that zoning. Yeah.
All right, no one has signed up in opposition. Is anyone here opposed? All right, public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3548.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, that is unanimous.
All right, the next item is item B5. That's actually not going to be a public hearing item, so I'm going to move past that one. Next item on the consent agenda item is item B6. This is case F1621. Petitioner is COC Investments LLC. They're requesting a site plan amendment for a GIS zone site. The site itself is approximately 26.94 acres, located on the north side of Ronaldo Road, across from Hoosier Drive and Seward Circle. You can see there it's just north of the western leg of the Northern Beltway. This is the proposed site plan. Essentially, what's before you today, they are petitioning to shift all of the storage buildings that were on the previously approved plan southeast to align with the new driveway location that they're proposing. That new driveway location will line up better with Hoosier Drive and also rectify a site distance issue that was found during the review process after the preliminary approval with traffic engineers. So just to give you a little more context, this was the previously approved rezoning here. You can see that everything was shifted further northeast with that separate driveway access location. And then again, this is the proposed plan showing it shifted further southeast. One other item of note, they are showing a stub connection. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor there, right there. That's to provide continued use of this access easement that continues for the enjoyment of the properties offsite. Excuse me. Staff does recommend approval of this request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Was there mention of a retail or office in this area on this plan?
Yes, there is going to be an associated office in the front of the property.
Associated with the storage?
With the
Is that what
storage,
it was?
correct.
I couldn't tell whether it was associated with the storage or a storage.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Any additional questions? All right, no one has signed up in opposition. Is anyone here opposed to this request? All right, seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye. Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F1621.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, your next items are non-public hearing items. The first non-public hearing item will be this preliminary subdivision, item C1, 2022-115. This is the Hidden Hills preliminary subdivision. It's a 28-lot subdivision located in RS20 zoning. It's a 49.21 acre site located on the south side of Tuttle Road, across from Pretty Farm Road. As you can see, it's pretty close to the Stokes County line there. It's east of Tobaccoville and some actually King jurisdiction as well. This is the proposed preliminary plat. Again, they're showing one entry access drive. All of the lots, most of the lots do generally exceed the minimum 20,000 square foot lot size. All the lots do meet minimum lot width requirements. There may have been some questions about what this line, and again, I apologize for my pointer here. This line right here, that is the, I believe that's required for the buffering. So that's actually a buffer requirement for that portion of Muddy Creek there. And just another note, this remainder area is actually a lot. That is a flag lot that has access to that cul-de-sac there. Again, there were no real opportunities for additional connectivity here. The site is really bounded by the railway to the north and pretty severe topography and flood zone to the south and east. So there are no other opportunities for connectivity. The site plan itself does meet UDO requirements, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? All right.
And y'all recommend approval.
Second.
All right. Been motion and second by Mr. Lemon, Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All right, the next item is another preliminary subdivision request. This is item C2, number 2022-116. This is Taylor's Run Phase 2. It's a 9-lot subdivision in RS9 zoning. It's a 10.52 acre site located on the south side of Fry Bridge Road, west of Taylor Run Drive. This is in the southwestern portion of the county below Clemens city limits. Not too far from a water treatment plant to the east there, just for locational information. This is the proposed preliminary plat. You can see that these are all proposed large lots. The lot is not served by public sewer, so they'll be proposing on-site septic for those lots. They are proposing a new public street connection. So there are two disconnected segments of street here. I can't remember the exact name of that street, but I believe that's Farrier Drive to the west, and that new street will connect those, and that will all be Farrier Drive there. The site plan itself, again, does meet all UDO requirements, and staff recommends approval of this request.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
Next items are your planning board review cases. This is item D1, PBR 2022-15, Potter's House for Children. This is a request for a child daycare center in an IP zoning district. It's a 2.23 acre site on the west side of Hutton Street, south of Washington Park Lane. So this is kind of just down the street from Diggs Latham Elementary next to the Pentecostal Church. This is the proposed site plan. They are proposing this to be used for 40 children maximum with approximate 3 employees on shift. They are proposing to reuse the existing, I believe it's approximately 1,700 square foot building on site, and that existing private drive. They're sharing that private drive with the church to the north. They're going to formalize their parking area and increase the size of the gravel that's out there, make sure that they have their ADA compliance taken care of. They are showing their required type 1 20-foot buffer yard against the multifamily zoning to the south. Again, the site plan does meet UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval of this request.
Move approval.
Second.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why does this require to go through this process?
I would probably defer to your planning director on that one.
It's just that's what's spelled out in the ordinance for the establishment of a child daycare center not operated by a church.
Oh, it's not operated.
It's not
by the
operated by a church. It's
That's what I missed
church
in the,
adjacent. I believe it may even be on their property, but it's not being operated by them.
Yeah, I
So
thought it was
that's
on
what
property.
necessitates it having to go through a
Okay.
formal planning board review.
So Carolina University is actually,
Correct.
Operated.
That's my understanding.
okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Brown, I didn't understand the aspect of your request.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a previous motion and second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Next planning board review item is item D2, PBR 2022-16. This is a request by Flower Box Bed and Breakfast. Again, it's a request for a bed and breakfast in a resident RS9 zoning district. It's 0.52 acres located on the north side of Salisbury Ridge Road across from Nelson Street. I think everyone is familiar with the location of this site. It's in the Washington Park neighborhood. So the proposed site plan, again, the petitioner is proposing to use the existing building on site. You may be able to see, I'm trying to get my pointer there. You may be able to see that they're going to use the existing building for the bed and breakfast for the majority of the square footage, with a small remainder for a residence. It is a UDO requirement that bed and breakfast operations in single-family districts must be owner-occupied, so they're showing how they're meeting that requirement. They're showing the required parking area, the required buffering for that parking area against the other single-family zoning, required frontage street yards. Site plan does meet UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval of this request.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
I want to ask a question too,
Sorry.
you know.
All right.
Bed and breakfasts really used to be quite common. And coming from a neighborhood that had many of them, we realized there was a process to go through. But I can't remember a time that I've seen one come through here since I've sat on this board. And it's been many years, I think, before then that it's happened with that. So explain to the public a little bit the difference between a bed and breakfast ordinance and running a Airbnb or VRBO type institution.
The Airbnb and VRBO, I mean, that's where, you know, it's either you rent out the entire facility and someone comes in. Well, and again, I'm playing the full string. You know, comes in and, you know, rents out your house for, you know, a limited duration, and or, you know, you and your significant other, you live alone, whenever you have some additional rooms and you rent those out. Those, you know, again, as long as you don't go over the threshold of family, the definition of family, are allowed to operate without regulation, without limitation in our jurisdiction. And there's actually been some court cases recently decided for entities that did try to regulate them, that basically took away some of their ability to regulate them. And you have to be careful how you craft it. Currently, locally, we don't regulate those at all. The UDO for a bed and breakfast, it allows a higher level of occupancy than the definition of single family. I believe it allows up to 8 guests at a location. Again, it's owner occupied, and the approval process for that within a residential area is two-pronged, and we're on the first prong of this today. It has to get a planning board review of the site plan, basically acknowledging that the site plan meets the requirements of the ordinance. Once that site plan is approved, then they have to file for a special use permit before the Board of Adjustment that will hold a quasi-judicial hearing on the actual decision whether or not to issue a special use permit for the bed and breakfast. The last one that I'm aware of that we did have is on South Main, just north of the chiropractor on the corner of Acadia and South Main. There was a house directly, I think it was directly to the north. It was either directly to the north or one more further to the north. There was a bed and breakfast that got approved through this process probably 12 to 14 years ago. Open for a short period of time, and again, it's my understanding from talking to some of the folks in the neighborhood, whenever the flower box came through earlier, that there were some issues outside of her control that basically forced her to close. That's the last one that I'm aware of. But again, there is a process where they'll have to, if this gets approved here today as far as the site plan, they'll still have to get the Board of Adjustment special use permit.
So what we're saying here is that the issues with parking, the issues with flow and things like that have been met by this application, and the neighborhood should relax about that. I'm very pleased that this has come back with some solution on how to use this property, so appreciate the explanation.
I did have a citizen to call me and wanted to know what would happen and who regulates the residents. So let's say the residence all of a sudden starts being rented out and it's not owner occupied. What happens?
citizens would need to file a complaint with our office. And again, if they started running it as something other than a bed and breakfast, if it became a boarding and rooming house, if it
Right.
became something other than what the intent was, they would need to complain to us. If it truly is being operated by a bed and breakfast, but it's not being operated in a very good manner, i.e., that would fall under the health department because it's considered accommodations, and I believe that would be regulated by the health department. So again, if the use skews from what it's supposed to be, that would be our department, but if it's just how it's being operated substandardly, that would be the health department.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, the next item is item D3, PBR 2022-17. Grace Baptist Church is the petitioner. The request is for additions and accessory buildings for a community-scale church in the IP and RS9 zoning districts. The site is approximately 6.90 acres. It's at the southeast corner of Peters Creek Parkway and Sides Road. I'm sure everyone knows where this is, but just a little context. This is kind of on the other side of Peters Creek Parkway, across from the Lowe's and Lidl, and just up northeast of the Walmart shopping center there. So the proposed site plan, it's showing a fair number of multiple expansions of existing buildings. I just want to back up and give you a little more context. This is, generally speaking, what's there now. We did not take on-site pictures for this because it's not a rezoning. But that gives you an idea of what the existing facility looks like. And this is what they're proposing. They're proposing a fairly large expansion here. And just again, one more bit of context. Plan north is to your left and plan south is to your right. They're proposing a pretty large expansion here, this wing. One smaller front expansion here. But approximately, I think it was 8,000 square foot gymnasium here. And then a new private access drive to access the already existing parking here. That's going to line up with this existing public street connection here. The site plan itself does meet UDO requirements. Staff does recommend approval of the request, and I'd be happy to answer any particular questions that you might have about the expansion.
Any questions?
Just, so the bold lines are the actual additions?
Correct.
Okay. That's not how I read it at home. Okay. I'm glad you clarified. Okay, I get it now.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, next planning board review item is item D4. That's PBR 2022-18. This is the Turtle Creek RS upgrade. Again, that's for the PNG utility site. It's requesting utilities in an RS9 zoning district. The site itself is approximately 0.93 acres. That's the entire parcel number. Just wanted to clarify, the site plan itself and the lease area is really more like half an acre, about 20,000 square feet, just to give you a little more idea of scale. It's more in the northwestern portion of that PIN number there. This is the proposed site plan. You can see they're showing new access drive off of Salisbury Road there with the required fire turnaround. There's no formalized parking because they do not plan to have any employees on shift. It's really just there for access as far as I understand it. New proposed fencing. And just to give you an idea of what this facility actually looks like, this is a profile of that. Again, I don't know the exact purposes of this, but we do have the engineer here if you want to exact about the function of this. But I generally understand it as to be there to maintain those residential service lines for the natural gas facility. They are showing a 10-foot buffer yard to the north, and they're extending that all the way across where they're going to provide crushed stone for the pad. The site plan itself does meet UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval of the request.
What is the purpose?
You want to go ahead? You can move first.
No, he
I
has
was
a
gonna ask-
question.
Yeah, what is the purpose you offered?
Yep, I'd be happy to, I think the engineer is here for this project.
I'm sorry, if you could
just come up to the podium.
come to the podium and state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Joel Smith, Zip code 27606,
And address, please.
2305 Briarton Woods Drive, Raleigh.
Thank you.
So very near to this site is an existing pressure regulator station that has aged. The infrastructure is out of compliance with federal guidelines, so we're putting in a new pressure-reducing regulator station near the other one and taking that system and associated piping out of service.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask him a
Yes.
question? You know, you have the lucky opportunity of coming a day when we're going to be looking at a UDO about explosions.
Okay.
Have you ever had one of these explode?
Not personally, no.
I'm not asking personally, I'm talking for the company.
That's a question I can't answer.
You can't,
I don't think regulator stations explode.
you think it's a fairly safe type things, and we shouldn't be looking to include it in explosive sites?
As you drive around, everywhere you go, you'll see these beside the
do.
road, behind fences.
Yeah.
You don't really know what they are unless you know what you're looking at. And those are just taking a transmission main pressure, reducing it down to a pressure that can go into residential, commercial facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
All right, that's it for the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, the board will now go back to, in your agenda, it's case B4, it's case F1618.
All right, I think we have one, our vice chair needs to recuse himself from this case.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Is there any objection to that?
All right.
You can go enjoy a cupcake.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Allred to present the staff report.
This is case F1618. Petitioner is Deepak Patel and Kripalu Abodes LLC. The site is 1.21 acres on the northwest corner of Kernersville Road and Hastings Hill Road, and this is a rezoning from RS9 to Neighborhood Business Special Use. This site is in GMA 3, suburban neighborhoods. It's on the eastern part of the county between Winston-Salem and Kernersville. The location map shows that this is RS9, totally surrounds this property. The aerial is shows open area with a couple of deciduous trees and one single-family residential house on the property. So this is looking east on Kernersville Road. The subject property is on the left. And this is looking west on Kernersville Road. Subject property is on the right. This is looking south on Hastings Hill Road. Again, a subject property is on the right. And this is the subject property looking north. This is where the food or drug store will be located at. The driveway access will be where you see the car parked in the back, and the existing single-family residential house is to the left. This is the area plan shows this site in the residential section of the Kernersville road corridor. There are two non-conforming lots to the southeast, and further to the east, you have the commercial zoning area for Kernersville that serves this area. The area plan recommends this to be 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre, residential 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre. The site plan has 10-foot street yards on the east and the south. NCDOT is taking some of the property for a Hastings Hill Road widening. The original design had a connection to Kernersville Road, but NCDOT asked them not to have a connection there. There is a 15-foot type 2 buffer yard on the west and the north. And the building is 3,000 square feet with parking on the west side. Here is what the site will look like, an overview of the site, the 3,000 square foot building. This is a viewpoint from Kernersville Road. Here's the top parts from Hastings Hill Road, again from Kernersville Road is the bottom picture. From the north is what you would see when you're on the driveway coming in, and from the west is the parking lot. That's what most of the customers would see if they parked at the proposed parking lot. Okay, so the proposed development could further promote commercial strip development along a largely residential section of the Kernersville Road corridor. The proposed development would likely attract customers from outside the neighborhood. Again, this is zone neighborhood business, and that doesn't follow the purpose of that zoning. And then, of course, it significantly increases traffic in the area. Based on conversations with the county attorney, this rezoning would be considered a legal zoning, spot zoning. For these reasons, staff does recommend denial. The site plan does meet UDO requirements.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yes. The only time I feel really inclined to go over something that's been looked at in a decision when it's spot zoning is if it somehow constrains or provides a service that isn't readily available, that has been a hardship for folks. How close is the closest other convenience or whatever? And I also realize that when we make a decision on this, we can't say that this is going to be the business there in 10 years from now. But with what they're saying they're going to put there, how far do residents have to go to get those kinds of supplies or whatever?
So it's about a mile to the Lowe's Hardware
Mile, okay.
Activity Center, but you can see the red,
Yeah.
there we go, the red portion over here. A little more than a mile over here is the Sedge Garden. It'll be the activity center when the Beltway, Northern Leg Beltway comes in. That's also will be the commercial section. It's unfortunately right off the map, but it's about right where my cursor's at on the left side. So it's kind of like dead in between two activity centers.
Okay.
So I have a question. So when we came up with neighborhood business, from what I remember, it was to allow amenities closer to people where they live. You could possibly walk or ride a bike. So I'm kind of torn with this, given that seems what it is, but it's being considered spot zoning. And I just kind of want to get some understanding of so where does neighborhood business particularly fit in if it's not an existing structure to say already in a neighborhood?
Do you want to answer it? Okay.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that, Mr. Farabee. So you'll recall from the text amendment that we did back in 2015 or so about neighborhood business that we actually had a district at that time that was kind of amorphous and didn't really have a clear mission statement, and we tweaked it then to make it much more approximate to the centers of neighborhoods and at the edges of already established commercial districts. So Kernersville Road obviously is a major thoroughfare at this point. This location, in the eyes of the county attorney's office, and staff would agree, is kind of on its own. If it were approved, it would be the only non-residential zoning in the area until you get to that well-defined activity center in Kernersville with the Lowe's, the Walmart, Harris Teeter, et cetera. So that's really staff's challenge with this request is it's kind of would be going out on its own on this corner and establishing commercial. We agree that neighborhood business probably isn't the ideal zoning district for a scenario like this, but we recommended it to the petitioner because at least it's the least intense district in the ordinance. So if the board decides they're interested in approving something like this, it's less intense than a limited business or a highway business or something else. But again, we usually always defer to the county attorney if they call something a spot zoning. We're kind of concerned at that point.
But we have approved, things that the county attorney has said could likely be spot or illegal spot zones.
And again, that's certainly something that is within the board's purview. It's just that staff generally just heeds those calls and leaves those decisions to the appointed and elected decision makers.
Would the support from staff be stronger if there were a greater density of residential surrounding this area, for the MBS?
I think absolutely, Mr. Lamb. I think that that's part of the challenge is that this is a very suburban context. There's not a lot of walkability or some of those things that Mr. Farabee was mentioning that were baked into the purpose of NB. So it's kind of, again, establishing a commercial precedent where there is none, and there's also not a robust sidewalk network or other ways where folks who live in the area could access it other than via automobile.
What's the non-conforming use just to the south of Kernersville? Is that the fishery? I can't remember what's.
One of them is, I believe, a nursery.
Yep.
Nursery, lawn and garden and supply, and I can't remember what the other one is.
Mobile, it's manufactured homes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can you explain to the public, I had 2 calls on this on my way here, what illegal spot zoning is?
Well, and again, I'm not going to try to be an attorney. I will just attempt to read or paraphrase what the attorney himself did actually write. And I'm sorry, I've actually got to get to it. Basically, spot zoning is in and of itself is not illegal. You can have, if you have a large enough parcel, if you have, if the type of zoning that you have is a different gradation, but is similar to, you can have a multifamily adjacent to a single family zone, it wouldn't be considered illegal spot zoning because it's residential. In this case, because there is no other commercial zoning within, about a mile in any direction, it's uniformly single family, and the parcel size is relatively small, right around an acre. Per the county attorney's analysis, it could be considered an illegal spot zone if this were approved and challenged in court. So basically, the generalized definition of spot zoning and illegal spot zone is whenever you have uniform zoning in an area and someone comes in and requests zoning that's not uniform in a small isolated area that makes it unlike anything else.
And that is inconsistent with approved
And
plan.
is inconsistent with the plan.
Just going a little further with that, it's been a number of years since we've had one, I believe, in front of us, but I think the typical classical case is where you've got ag, there was a country store, and now it's turned into suburban, and they're trying to come into compliance, and so, the county attorney's going to say the same thing. She's going to, or she or he's going to say, this could be considered an illegal spot zone, but then the board has acted in the past, at least for the past 20 years, we've approved some scenarios like that.
And Mr. Lamb, some of the cases that I think you're probably alluding to, such as off of Highway 66 south of Kernersville, one of the distinguishing factors in those cases is there was already precedence of those uses existing. A lot of those actually existed prior to zoning going in place. I forget if it was 67 or 68 in the county, but basically being non-conforming uses, and they wanted to do something with their property, expand or whatever, so they had to get right with the zoning. Whereas this is a little bit of a different scenario in that it would be a new addition on a vacant parcel. But you're absolutely right in terms of how the board has handled that in the past.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just want to read specifically what was in the memo as a basic framework for spot zoning. It says a zoning ordinance or amendment which singles out and reclassifies a relatively small tract owned by a single person and surrounded by a much larger area uniformly zoned so as to impose upon the small tract greater restrictions than those imposed upon the larger area, or so as to relieve the small tract from restrictions to which the rest of the area is subjected, is called spot zoning. It is beyond the authority of the local government in absence of a clear showing of a reasonable basis for such distinction.
With that, it's like you said, you're taking the residential restrictions away from the proposed project.
Right. You're essentially you're granting upon the smaller parcel here privileges that the larger parcels don't have, i.e., the ability to do commercial uses.
Okay.
And again, all this is predicated on whether or not the planning board can recommend approval in spite of an illegal spot zone opinion, and the elected body can approve a project in spite of an illegal spot zone opinion. If they do so and they do lose in court, should someone choose to appeal the decision, that's
it essentially rests in the courts. There's nothing that says that someone can't, that an entity can't rezone a property that could be considered an illegal spot zone. It's just if they do it and it gets appealed, the court could find that it was illegal and therefore reverse the decision.
Well, I think we need to look at, I mean, that's all possible, but we should be looking at, if we approve this, what are the impacts going to be on the neighbors in current time? Because we can't control if someone would be sued or not, and we should make our primary thought process about that.
And again, that is why, whenever we were speaking with the petitioner, and, again, they've been willing to work with us on trying to come up with a plan that is the best plan possible and is the least intense zoning district that allows the use that they're trying to do. Should this get approved, recommended for approval here and ultimately approved by the elected body, again, it was our desire in working with them to come up with something that meets what they want to do, meets the requirements of the ordinance, but is the least intense district possible.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff? All right, we will have a public hearing on this. Again, there is 12 minutes on each side. We have 2 proponents and 2 opponents. So we will start with the proponents. Again, if you will state your name, address, and zip code for the record. For the proponents, we have Ashley Shipp and Deepak Patel. So whoever wants to go first.
Hey guys. My name is Ashley Shipp. I am on behalf of 4667 Kernersville Road. I put that down as the address. My personal address is 1382 Landgrove Drive, which is Kernersville as well, right down the road.
And zip code, please.
27284.
Thank you.
I want to first start off by thanking everybody for being here. I know you guys got a lot on the docket, so hopefully I can make it quick. We're trying to put a rezoning in for a food mart. A lot of people think of this as a gas station type food mart, but this is more of a fresh market. That is our goal, is making this a fresh market where we have local produce and eggs and just a lot of stuff from local areas that you wouldn't necessarily get in these big red zones that you see up here. Our reasoning for this particular location, however, is mainly due to traffic. So you guys did say that we have a lot of traffic. We don't want to be drawing a lot of traffic in. But if you guys look up the Department of Transportation map, I have a couple of copies if you guys want those. And the road that we see from our lot to the big red zone, which is towards like the Walmart and the Lowe's and all of the main Kernersville area, we have an average daily traffic use of 20,000 cars going down that 2-lane road. There is a light there. There's only a turn lane going from Kernersville Road to Hastings Hill in both directions. So the turn lane is on beside the property, not by the entrance of where the entrance to this is, so it would not be interfering in traffic. But this would potentially divert a lot of that traffic that's coming in from the southwest Kernersville Road and from Hastings Hill that is having to kind of like bottleneck into that 20,000 cars. The Hastings Hill only has an average daily use of 200, and that's where our entrance is going to be, versus 20,000 on the road. So a lot of those people that are coming from below may be going towards Walmart or all of these other places just to pick up some local groceries. And instead, we would be diverting them to the lesser street that's not used as much. It would kind of free up that traffic as well. Another thing that was mentioned earlier is somebody said like local for biking. That actually is the Sedge Garden Bikeway. The Hastings Hill has a sign right across the street. It is like a 16-mile bikeway right there, so a lot of people could bike. You cannot bike on Kernersville Road to go to Walmart. It is almost impossible. You would get hit by a car. So it would provide a lot of people within walking distance. There are no sidewalks, but a biking path is very good, and you would reduce the traffic on the roads in terms of cars. Personally, I think I kind of stepped up on this project because I have 2 kids and I would like to have fresh local produce in the area and somewhere that's not like in high traffic. So if I wanted to take my kids on a bike, we live right off of Sedge Garden. Once that new bypass comes in, it's going to be really busy on Kernersville Road, and to be able to go down Hastings Hill and to get to an actual grocery store that's not Walmart Neighborhood Market, which is down the road on the other direction, would just be a healthier option. And we have a couple of people in support. We had somebody send an email that is in full support of this being a fresh local market. We sent out a whole bunch of flyers. We went 20 houses in every direction from the intersection, 80 houses in total. About 50 of them answered the door, and of those 50, we had all of them were, yes, this is good. We are in support of this. We obviously didn't have anybody who was fully against. We do have some people here who are against, so I would like to hear from them as well. But I mean, our biggest thing, we sent out some letters, we sent out these flyers, we gave them the opportunity to voice their opinion on Google Forms. On Google Forms, we only had 3 responses. A lot of people are more old school, knocking on the door. We do also have a son and daughter here that live across the street in the lot right next to where we see the red A on the map. And you will be able to, if you want to speak with them, I'm sure they came in a little later, so I don't think they signed their name down. But yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shipp. Any questions for Ms. Shipp?
I have just one. I'm somewhat confused relative to intention, even though we can't control future intentions. Our report describes your intention as a food or drug store, which doesn't sound exactly like what you're talking about. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so I think food or drug store is kind of the general category that it classifies under, because we will be selling produce and eggs. We'll have a cold area. But most of it's going to be not like a farmer's market where you have vendors come in and then provide their goods there. It will be an organized where we go to the actual farmers or to local people who are selling, who have farms, who have eggs, and sourcing them in. So like local honey, we have a lot around, and just seasonal items where somebody can go and have their main staples that, such as like the fresh market that you have that's more of like a chain store. But this would be more of supporting local farmers and providing healthy options that's guaranteed versus a farmer's market that you go there and you may not have everything you need and you still have to make a trip to Walmart or some other main like grocery store. And that's the biggest goal of having this as a food mart. It's not a food mart. I know that is the classification. It's more of a fresh mart, but that's not a category that we can put on the docket.
And it's also there by default not a drug store?
It's not a drugstore, no.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions for Ms. Shipp? All right, thank you. How much time do we have left?
7 minutes, I'm sorry, they've used 5.
All right, we have 7 minutes left.
Thank you again.
Mr. Deepak Patel, if you would like to speak.
Yeah, Deepak Patel, 130 Stanley Farm Road, Kernersville, North Carolina, 27284. So I'm the owner of the property, and my intention is basically people don't like, if you know like anyone, Kernersville, they don't like to go to Walmart, period. And there are citizens, they live right across. And they were a little late, so they would be able to sign, but they don't want to go to Walmart or anything. They had one store, which is QM, further on the Kernersville Road. They demolished that because they are building the highway. So right now, there's nothing in that area where people can go other than Walmart. Now, if you're coming from Business 40, there is no fresh market or anything if you're going away from the town. So that was the main reason to help the community to have something local. I know it is spot zoning, but we wanted to give it a shot. And people need to at least understand with all of this community that they want something local, in that area rather than going to Walmart.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to give...
we will yield the floor.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
6 minutes.
All right, we have 6 minutes left. Would anyone else like to speak in support?
Yes.
All right, if you could state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Alan Scott Castens Jr. I live at 709 Hastings Hill Road, area code 2824.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the main reason why I want to support this bit like small neighborhood business starting is because like the only place that we can actually go is like Walmart and other like not like mom and pop shop business type of establishments. And I have neighbors up there on the corner right there, the trailer park on the corner of Kernersville and Main Street. And they would all like jump at the idea of having somewhere local where they can just, we can just walk right across the street from the corner and just have something available to us rather than just going down a really busy street, down all the way to Walmart and to all the way at the neighborhood Walmart even. I have family members that live over in Coltrane Drive that's just south of us, and they were even up on the idea of getting local produce and just local goods from a neighborhood establishment.
All right, any questions for, all right, thank you. How much time do we have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Would anyone else like to speak in support? If you could please state your name, address, and zip code for the record. Take your time.
Yeah, I have 7 pins in my leg. My name's Lisa Combs, and I live at 709 Hastings Hill Road. I don't really like the hustle bustle of having to go into Walmart with the way things are right now in society. It's just really stressful. I've had an aneurysm 6 years ago. I had a blood clot 20 years ago, and I just want an easy way to get my food and not have to worry about watching my back or what's going to happen the next aisle over. So this is like a produce mini family store. I mean, we don't have to worry about finding a parking spot, or not just because I live across the street, but because it's not like Walmart or Costco or places like that where you have multiple people going to those stores because they're name brand stores. That's not really what I'm looking for. I want to have a produce store that I can go to that's close without me having to worry about stressing of getting in my car to go. I don't care if it's a mile or 10. I really don't like driving my car. So this would be really helpful for me in my situation. And I know my family and my other grandchildren also would gladly go to the store beside Walmart.
Thank you, Ms. Combs.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, how much time?
4 minutes.
All right, 4 minutes left. We have anyone? Yes, ma'am?
Would I be able to say something?
Yes, we have 4 minutes left.
One other thing that I did forget to mention earlier, if you guys go a little further than what you have on the map on the northwest corner, there's actually a development for D.R. Horton for a subdivision that's going in, and that's being planned to go in there. So that's going to add a lot of residential people within biking and walking distance to this location as well on that already lower trafficked road. And with it already having like across the street, we have already the stores that are practicing right on the lot where the A-Star is. Not sure what A-Star stands for, but they actually have like a landscaping business there, and a lot of times every weekend they have like this yard sale out there with all of these jeans and stuff, and you have people parking on like that main road just to go over there. So it kind of already is a central hub where people are gathering for stuff, and to be able to divert that a little bit further and have it where people are able to walk to or to bike to on the less used road instead of being on the main used road, I think would be very beneficial.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, how much time?
2 minutes.
All right. Yes. If you could state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
Christian Vestal, 150 South Federal Street, Ashburn, North Carolina, 27205. I actually work for the design engineer for Mr. Deepak Patel. And just to speak as a character reference to him, all the projects we've done, he has, as what he said he would put out there, he has put out there. So just to speak to his character reference. Also to speak to the city's behalf, In introducing us to neighborhood business, we thought as soon as they gave it to us, this is the best thing for this spot, for this site, for the developer's intentions. We think that everything that they have proposed and sent to us, and in regards to the site plans changes, all the codes and ordinances, they will be met. The city will, of course, ensure that. And then also to the design standard, you saw all the renderings of the building. It's not a gas station. It's not technically even a food mart. But what they have put there is something I believe that maybe you guys would be on board with. I don't think it was quite portrayed that way from the very beginning, but it's definitely where we're at now. And we would want your support on this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. 1 minute. Anyone else like to speak in favor? All right, then we will turn to the opponents. I think it's Georgine Gay and Harold Ivy. Whoever wants to speak first, if you would come to the podium. If you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
My name's Harold Ivy. I live at 624 Hastings Hill Road, 27284. I've lived there in that address since '96, and I've continually seen more and more congestion in that intersection. The intersection has been expanded to turning lanes on Main Street, but it has continually got more and more. And with this site being put there and that one entrance exit for that business is going to make more congestion in that area. There's been numerous wrecks at that intersection, even with the new turn lanes. And there is convenience or stores within 1.5 miles at the other end of Hastings Hill at Beeson Road. And as a resident there, it's just, that's not an ideal location, in my opinion.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Ivy?
I couldn't tell from your address, how close will you
I'm
actually?
3 doors down.
3 doors down Hastings?
Down Hastings Hill, yes.
Okay.
Right behind it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
11 minutes.
Georgine Gay, 112 Watermill Road, Kernersville, 27284. I live down Hastings Hill Road. I don't know which, away from this.
I believe her subdivision is located to the northwest, just off the map. If you head up Hastings Hill Road towards the left-hand side of the paper, you'll actually see her property whenever we consider F-1620.
Yes, we're right next to.
Correct.
To that, correct. I've lived there, my husband and I have lived there for 5 years. That's an extremely busy intersection. Hastings Hill is not a small road. It's constant traffic. I travel that way all the time. It's constant traffic. I've seen numerous accidents at that intersection. To put a business there with only one entrance, I can't imagine how that's, there's a stoplight there. How are people going to get in and out? I can't imagine a worse place. It does sound like a good business. It sounds like a horrible location to me. And within a mile, mile and a half, there's 5 grocery stores. It is not a walkable area, and I can't imagine riding a bike in that area. You would get hit. That Hastings Hill Road is not something I would ever walk or bike on.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Gay? Thank you, Ms. Gay.
One other thing, if this is approved, what would be the possibility of this changing to some other type of business in the future, like a sweepstakes or who knows what? That bothers me.
To answer the question specifically related to that, and I'm sorry, I've got to get back to the staff report. I believe the only use on this request is for the use, and I'm sorry, I've been jumping around to a lot of different cases, so if you'll just hold on a second. I believe the only use is food or food and drugstore. So to answer the question, it couldn't legally change use to something else. Now, it could illegally change use, but the only use that is being requested as part of this project is the use food or drugstore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And what is the reason drugstore is included?
Well, I mean, again, that's specifically from the UDO, and that's where I was, and I had to jump back into the agenda. We're challenged, or we're charged with putting proposed uses into the closest use in the ordinance that someone is proposing. In other words, basically, if it's a legal use, we have to put it into its closest use based on the description of what they're planning to do. You've got you've got convenience store, you've got other things, but, in looking at what they're proposing no gas sales, they're not proposing any of that kind of thing. The definition of food or drugstore that is the use, food or drugstore. It says an establishment primarily engaged in selling food for home preparation and consumption, or prescription drugs, non-prescription medicines, and related lines. This definition includes all uses in the following SIC groups: 54, food stores, 591, drugstores, and proprietary stores. So, based on what they're proposing to do, this is the closest use in the UDO for what they're wanting to do.
How much time do I have? 8 minutes? What do you have?
It's 9 minutes for the opposition, Mr.
All right. We have 9 minutes left for the opposition. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition? All right. Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. Board, what is the pleasure of the board?
A couple of questions. This could convert to a 3,000-foot pharmacy. It could.
Yes, that's correct. Again, we would have to do, since this is special use zoning, we would have to see what is being proposed and see if it could either be done at the staff level as a staff change, or whether it would need to go back through the full process again, since it would be tied to the site-specific plan of development.
Right. But those you mentioned, that's the only permitted use.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can you restrict that even further voluntarily?
Yes.
Well, it is an F.
You can. We don't. Again, generally speaking, we don't like to. There have been instances in the past with a former council member who did not like tattoo parlors, who would further restrict the use services to specifically prohibit the sub-use tattoo parlors. It makes it more difficult for staff because it's just something else to keep track of. But again, if the board felt so compelled, and the elected body did as well, and the petitioner was agreeable to it, because again, that would be a condition of approval and the petitioner would have to agree to it. I think you could limit it just to food stores, but again, when you've already kind of limited yourself to one use, and the actual, the actual probably impact between a food store and a drugstore, if you don't have a drive-through, is probably the exact same. Whenever you introduce the drive-through, which a lot of pharmacies have gone to under today's model, is where you get even more impact. But in order for them to have a drive-through, they would have to show that on the plan, which at that point would be we wouldn't approve that as staff change. It would be a site plan amendment that would have to come back to the planning board and ultimately to the elected body. So I think there are a lot of protections built in. Again, obviously, if it's something that the planning board desires, I think you could potentially ask the petitioner if they'd be willing to further restrict it to just the food aspect of it. But again, they've already limited their scope of uses so much. It would just further.
Yep, can't be a convenience store. They can't sell gas. They can't put a car wash up. They can't, do any of that kind of stuff.
Very limited.
Yeah, very, very
Let me follow up on something Jack asked, though. I walk into a lot of stores and they sell lottery tickets. That would still be allowed, wouldn't it?
You can, basically for a lottery ticket, all you have to be able to do is.
You have a zonings for sweepstakes office? For sweepstakes?
Sweepstakes is the use electronic sweepstakes.
Is it?
It is. Now, that's in the city.
Is that what Ms. Carmen would say?
It is. Keep in mind, this is in the county. The county never actually approved that regulation. But the county, in addition to the city, have been serving notices that, again, you know, we go down this path every few years, but again, they're trying to shut all of those down. But, you know, again, I've seen lottery tickets sold at tire dealerships.
Right.
So again, that's a state consideration, just like, you know, just like the state also regulates ABC. I mean, theoretically, if the state wanted to issue an ABC license for someone to sell liquor in a residential area, they could, because it's outside of local land use regulation. To answer, you know, but getting back to this particular use, food or drugstore, I mean, again, that is the use.
Yeah.
What's the distance? What's the length? I can't tell. Is it 151 feet along Hastings Hill? Is that what it is? The biggest concern I've got is stacking. Now, what is that? Is that 151 feet?
It's approximately 151 feet along Hastings Hill, and just for the record, it's about 139 along Kernersville.
Okay, what do you figure a car, 18 feet or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might hold 7 cars.
Yeah, 6 or 7
8.
cars, right, yeah.
Well-
Of course, there's no signalization required here. They're not even allowed right there. Yeah.
Well, they'd have to have their driveway permit. If it was that serious, they would not be able to get a driveway permit. Or,
Well, I mean, again, that gets back to one of those difficult situations. If the state refused to issue a driveway permit, the state would have to buy the whole property, because they couldn't deny a use of property. If they decided that they couldn't issue the driveway permit, they would have to buy the property from the property owner. With that being said, they can, you know, as part of the driveway permit, if they get out there and they see that they need left turn lanes and, you know, decel lanes and those kind of things, I mean, that is part of the driveway permit. For a use like this, I really probably don't see it coming to that, given the size of it. But all those considerations will be handled whenever they actually come in to get their building permit. And one of the things they have to do is submit their driveway permit that they've
I
already
probably
had
missed it in
approved.
your analysis, but what's the traffic counts on, what's the grade of service on Hastings Hill Road? Is that in the D range these
So
days?
it's level, the capacity is 15,300 for level service D. Hastings Hill was 5,800. It was 11,000 on Kernersville Road, and on the other side, which is in your staff report, but it's on the other side, it's about 20,000, like the lady said.
Yeah,
So you're over capacity on the other side of the traffic light.
yeah, yeah.
On Kernersville, well,
Kernersville.
On
yeah,
Kernersville.
Road.
Kernersville Road.
Yes, that's correct.
but on actual Hastings
Hill,
Hill,
yeah.
You're under.
I mean, if the capacity at level of service D is 15,000 and they're around the 5,000 to 6,000 range, there's still lots of capacity on Hastings Hill.
And that's where I think all the traffic's going to come from, north and south, but a ton of it from the south. And it is a gauntlet to go northeast to the closest convenience store, which would have comparable services. It's not exactly the same use, but
Kirk, you had mentioned earlier, just for educational sake, about precedents, that if you did this, would maybe set precedents. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, if you want to go back to the land use map, that'll help me provide a little bit of context. So, again, Mr. Chairman and Board, if you look at this map here, you see there's a huge swath of red commercial zoning in the town of Kernersville limits, Harmon Creek Road, the Lowe's, Walmart, Target, Harris Teeter, et cetera. And just off this map to the west, our staff did a plan that showed commercial at the Beltway interchange when that gets constructed. And also, as some of the residents have kind of mentioned, just further southeast, also in the town of Kernersville, there is a Walmart neighborhood market and CVS. If you were to install some commercial zoning at this location, that might encourage other property owners who have gotten kind of sick of the traffic and some of the other things, some of the other impacts at this location, to see if they could get commercial zoning for their property. That would just make it a little bit harder for the board to deny that request if you let the camel's nose under the tent, so to speak, and kind of get it first.
But not impossible.
Right, not impossible. And again, the staff is just coming from this under the guise of what the adopted policy says. If the board takes the perspective that this plan was done 5 years ago, conditions have changed out here, that's certainly within the board's prerogative, but whichever decision is made, that would kind of affect the precedent that staff kind of looks at future cases under.
So if there's already, last question or just thought process here, if there's already, what I've heard spoken today, selling going on at this spot already, is that?
Across the street.
Across the street.
Yeah.
It's kind of doing the same thing, right? It just doesn't have a fixture, a building.
I think a little bit of the difference is the extent or the scale of what's going on. Again, that's more of a landscape supply operation under the asterisk A site there, and the UDO does allow for off-premises sales of agriculture, you know, at a roadside stand or things of that nature, which sounds like what they're doing is almost an accessory to the actual retail use of the property. So it's not functionally different, but the scale is different, and as you said, kind of the permanence by putting an investment of a structure here, that kind of normalizes that type of activity, whereas the farm stand is basically just as long as someone has some surplus crops and it's working for them, they'll come out here, but they're not really tied to anything.
So to address Ms. Gay, I think the last thing, if this is approved, if the board approves this, the residents can rest assured, even though they may not like it, that all this could be is a food place or
Small pharmacy.
a small pharmacy.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And again, any change, even such as installing a drive-through or some of the concerns that Mr. Lamb brought up, that would require a site plan amendment going through the whole process over again, because staff is not charged in our resolution for staff changes to authorize things like that.
All right, I'm done.
Where is the D.R. Horton subdivision that Mrs. Shipp was referring to? Is that's not between the Metro Activity Center and this site?
No, it's further to the
Okay,
northwest.
Got it. Northwest?
Off the map, I believe it's,
Not northeast.
It's Hastings
Northwest.
Hill, right?
Northwest.
yeah, I believe it's northwest on Hastings Hill.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which would be
Towards East Forsyth.
towards
Yeah,
East
towards
Forsyth.
East Forsyth,
Okay.
yep.
It'll be right next to where the eastern leg of the Northern Beltway is.
Okay.
Is that the next case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, are there any, you know, I don't think I closed the public hearing, did I?
No, sir, you did not.
Okay, thank you. I now declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Well, I think when you're looking like the spot zoning issue, and I understand that would be a real possibility, in listening to all the factors, you've got a much bigger factors affecting the traffic and what's happening on these roads than this limited use property would be. And I'm not hearing immediate impacts to neighbors. I'm hearing that regional traffic concern as opposed to specific things to the use of that property. In terms of if anything went there, it would raise those same concerns.
All right. Would you like to make a motion?
Just make sure, again, we've, two-pronged motion.
Two-pronged, yes.
Yeah, so, I
Yes,
mean,
yes,
again,
yes.
I don't know whether you're going to think it's in compliance with, with it or not, but just make sure, I mean, again, keep in mind, you can find that it's not in compliance with the comp plan and still recommend approval.
Okay, this is 1618. I've got it.
Yep, 1618.
Now you've made me think about the consistent, inconsistent again with the colors on the map with that and the uses. Which would be a big discussion with me of what the plan, components of the plan are. But to simplify that and to recognize it is in an area that's designated residential, I move the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. Lamb. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same sign. That is unanimous.
Okay, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F-1618.
I have a motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. Lamb. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same sign. Okay, one opposed. All right. Could someone get Mr.
Yep.
Steve's got it, or Ed won, yeah.
All right, so that passes. That has been approved.
And keep in mind, this is a recommendation that will go on to the elected body some point in the next probably 6 weeks. It will go to the county commissioners. Mr. Chairman, the next item is case B5.
Okay. The town. Gotcha. Do you know that now? Thank you.
Seems like a bad hate at Walmart, right?
Sorry. I just assumed you're getting ready to do it.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, we're looking at case F1620, petitioners PMP of Asheboro LLC. The site is 25.8 acres on the south side of Hastings Hill Road, west of Watermill Road. This is a special use rezoning from RS9 to RM8S. This site is located very close to the previous one. It is in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods between Winston-Salem and Kernersville. Here is the location map. The entire area is zoned RS9 around it. To the east is the county's RS9 zoning. To the south is the city of Winston-Salem's RS9 zoning. And to the west and north is the Beltway. Okay, and here's the aerial. It shows that you got one single-family house up on Hastings Hill Road. There's like a tree line and then some open area and then a large tree area that's about covering half the property to the south. The area plan, again, shows the entire area to be single-family residential, 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre. And this here is looking east on Hastings Hill Road. Subject property is on the right. This is looking west on Hastings Hill Road. Subject property is on the left. This is looking south on the northern Beltway, and the subject property is on the left. And this is the entrance, the current entrance to the residential house, and the entrance that would be to the proposed development. And if you remember that tree line that was at the northern portion, this is right at that tree line, looking at the open area. And this is the neighboring subdivision, which had quite a few trees. A nice little existing buffer yard was there. This is the site plan. It is a 100 townhome unit development. There is a 10-foot street yard between the Hastings Hill Road and the northern parking area, a 40-foot type 2 buffer yard on the eastern side and the south side that you see here. There will be a 20-foot thoroughfare overlay along the the northern Beltway. The development has two recreation areas here, and 4 visitor parking areas over in those areas. The density of this development is 3.88 dwelling units per acre. So the property currently is on RS9. Maximum of RS9 is 4.84 dwelling units per acre. So this development is similar in density to the RS9 neighborhood beside it. Here's a rendering of 1620 of the townhome development that will be built. There will be an added condition. Staff found this as a 20-foot thoroughfare overlay buffer will be required along Northern Beltway. So if you guys do decide to recommend it, just make sure you add the condition to that recommendation. Okay. The development has a proposed density of 3.88 units per acre, which again is similar to the neighboring development. The request will promote a mix of housing types, providing more housing choices for the population. The proposed traffic impact for townhomes, of course, is less than it is for single-family residential. So the current traffic impact for the 100 townhomes is 581 trips per day. If this was to come back, say, as like a PRD for the RS9, you could get a maximum trip count of 1,186. So what's currently proposed is less than the maximum allowed under the current single-family zoning. For these reasons, staff does recommend approval. Site plan does meet UDO requirements once you put that thoroughfare overlay portion on it.
Are there any questions for staff?
You mentioned there were two activity areas. I see the playground and gazebo. Is the other one the neighborhood park and recreation area?
Yeah, it's the large area right
So
there.
is that like an active field, I guess? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, if you're aware for PRD, we do require on the PRDs to show the activity, but with the multifamily, it's just showing where you're going to be at.
Okay, I got it now.
This is just a really small detailed question for my knowledge primarily. How many units can you have as a maximum that are of which all are served by a single mail kiosk?
Really good.
If you can figure that out, I'm sure that there's some developers who would want to talk to you. That's one of those things that's a difficult thing to address and figure out. Basically, you've got. No, I mean, again, basically that was something that was, pushed down by the U.S. Postal Service. That was, I don't want to say forced, but essentially it kind of forced local governments to try to accommodate those in gang box areas and come up with standards for them. Of course, prior to the USPS. Again, obviously, they're trying to increase efficiency. Have efficiency. And so they put those standards forward. I don't know that there is a golden standard. I'm sure they might be able to tell you, but I've seen subdivisions or projects of this size have a couple of them, and I've seen projects 4 times this size have one. So it really just depends.
Do we need to be at all concerned about how many parking spaces to serve the kiosk area?
Generally speaking, it doesn't matter how many parking spaces you have. More than likely, folks are going to pull off to the side of the road and never pull in the parking space anyway. I mean, again, and I hate to say that. I mean, again, but unless it's signed as no parking, that's generally, that's just human behavior. It's just like why people park in front of the Fire Atlantic grocery stores. I mean, you shouldn't, but people do. I mean, and I'm not trying to be flippant, but We were forced to try to come up with regulations within subdivisions and multifamily projects to try to, address the cluster box mail kiosk issue 10 to 12 years ago when the United States Postal Service pushed this down. Again, you have a parking requirement for a subdivision, and again, as long as you're meeting the parking, for in this case, a multifamily project, a townhome project, as long as they're meeting those requirements from an ordinance perspective, they're fine. There are standards that for the kiosk, if you're going to provide it, you either have to have a pull-off area to get folks out of traffic, or provide a parking lot, but there are no specs as far as the number of spaces that need to be provided.
Very insightful question, Mr. Stillman. Thank you. Any further comments for staff? All right. We do have a public hearing. We do have proponents and opponents in this case. Again, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. And we'll start with the proponents. And if I butcher your last name, I apologize. I think it's Amanda Odier. Hodier. Was it really? Great. If you could state your name properly for me and your address and zip code.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. My name is Amanda Hodiern, 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200 in Greensboro, and that's 27408. I'm here tonight on behalf of the property owner, of course, of record, but also on behalf of the would-be developer here, which is D.R. Horton, as you've heard mentioned this evening. Our request is, as you see here, a special use zoning to RM8 for the plan you see before you. This is, I would submit to you, a very reasonable and balanced residential proposal here for attached single-family housing. Just a technical aspect of this, the reason we requested RM8, despite the densities you've heard, which are really closer aligned with your RM5 district, is just because your RM8 district does not allow more than 4 units to be attached. And that was important to us because so much of this proposal is really driven by being a good steward of this piece of property. It's a very efficient way to utilize this piece of property as it lies now, the way that it's been left from the right-of-way for the Beltway, and then also for the significant environmental features to the south of the property. You're left with a developable piece here, and using it the best way possible, I would submit to you, is with this attached housing proposal. We also wanted to do a couple things. We wanted to keep the development away from our single-family neighbors to both borders. That was pretty easy to do to the south with the big stream corridor there and all the vegetation that we're leaving. But to our other border, the top of the page as you see it, which of course is our east, we did want to be thoughtful about that. So we, of course, wanted to slide things over to the Beltway as much as we could, as you've seen here. But the other thing we did is we laid the roads out such that they run perpendicular to the road of our neighbor to the east. And what that does is it means that our homes, you only see the side of our townhome buildings. You don't see the back, which would be a long, expansive facade, expansive facade that is, somewhat bigger than a single-family footprint or building shape. So when those neighbors do look through that significant buffer and that significant space that we've left certain times of year, they'll just see the side of what could be a home that looks just like theirs. So we liked the way that laid out. And of course, as you know, this being a special use site plan submittal, this can't be changed or converted without your approval. So an approval here tonight and subsequently by the county commissioners would mean that this is what you're going to get. So just to come back to a few key elements, this is the density here works out to 3.88 units an acre, which is of course less than what your RS9, your current zoning, would yield. Just to napkin math, that works out to 124 lots in a perfect world if you were to develop this under RS9. So it is a lesser density, and again, that's just another illustration of how this is a good way to utilize this piece of property. It's a nice, efficient layout that still, I think, gets the highest and best use out of this property. It keeps it residential in keeping with your plans for the area. I know, and you know, that this specific area plan does call for single-family residential, but I believe, and clearly your staff believes, that this proposal does overcome that recommendation for the reasons I've discussed. Impact-wise, we've talked about keeping our distance from our single-family neighbors with our thoughtful and intentional layout here, but also traffic. Because of the numbers we just went over, this proposal actually generates fewer trips, significantly fewer trips, as you can see in your staff report, than development at the current zoning would generate. In terms of the community we're planning here, this is something that D.R. Horton's excited about. It'll be a nice community, relatively small and intimate, just 100 units. So we are planning some key placemaking and community features with the 2 recreation spots that you've seen. One we already have programmed here with a playground, a gazebo, sitting area, that sort of thing. That's more in the heart of the neighborhood, as you can see, centrally located. And the other, as you pointed out, is to the other location, and it looks now to be kind of a nice field ready for a pickup game or a community field day, things of that nature, which it will be, and we're excited about that. But also, by not fully programming it now, it gives us the ability to kind of see how the site balances out, and see where the best spot for that dog run might be, where we could work in a fire pit, that sort of thing. So there will be some more active programming to that area. We don't want to take away the play opportunity, but there'll be some more recreation components that go in there as the community takes more shape on the ground. Like I said, a community of this size, it's something where we really look to be able to infuse those community features so you can get to know your neighbors and have a sense of livability. The site breathes really well through the use of all the open space. That's a key feature as well when we talk about recreation. It's also nice to be able to just get outside and go walk around after work. So we've got sidewalks proposed on one side of each of our streets, so you can walk down a sidewalk safely and access all these recreation areas, and have some nice breathability in your site and enjoy some of that passive open space. In terms of your kind of land use planning concepts, of course, we are here in the shadow of the Beltway. So another key reason I think it makes sense to have this land use form in this location and then have that transition back into your single-family neighborhoods as this is laying out to do. It's also in your growth area 3, which is this is a consistent use form for that growth area. I have with me here tonight Mr. Ryan Moats, who is the development manager for this project for D.R. Horton. If you have any questions of him, I also have with me Mr. Lee Bryant of Evans Engineering. He's responsible for our design and civil work that you see here. So if you have any technical questions, he's also available. We did hold a community meeting. We sent out a letter to exactly 105 neighboring property owners, inviting them to contact me via email or phone if they wished, or also invited them to a neighborhood Zoom meeting that we held. I did receive one email, which I saw was included in your packet. I received a couple phone calls, and we had 2 participants log into the meeting. And those questions that we got were, as you saw in your community summary, kind of just verifying locational aspects and sort of relational aspects. If I live here, what's this going to mean for me type of questions. So answer those to the best of my ability. Perhaps you'll hear from some of those folks tonight, but I believe that the site planning transparency and predictability that your process provides was able to answer most of those questions for people. So with that, we are available for questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Let me ask a question. I like the idea of some density around these intersections that we have that are running around with this new beltway, but I'm also guessing that there's no way to get more on this?
You could get some more. This wasn't our absolute yield, but we wanted to do things, and staff encouraged us to do things as we went through the TRC process. Things like making sure that the play area was accessible without having to walk behind someone's unit.
Mm-hmm.
We needed to get those turnaround areas at the end of the roads. We wanted to make sure that, like I said, we're leaving enough opportunity to balance the site. It does fall off to the south. So
yeah, that's what I was looking at, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that this represents probably your highest and best yield. I don't know that it's getting every blood drop out of the turnip, but I think this is probably a good, reasonable approach.
Thank you.
Just a general question. So when I think of D.R. Horton, I think of single family mostly. What percentage, if you could kind of give me a rough idea, do you do townhomes versus single family? Is this like 50-50? You have expertise in this space?
Ryan might be able to answer that better. I'll let you.
Ryan Most with D.R. Horton, 4150 Mendenhall Oaks Parkway, High Point, North Carolina, 27265, I believe is. I would say our balance probably is around 50-50, but D.R. Horton does not only single-family detached, single-family attached. We have a multifamily division. We have a commercial division, and so we kind of do it all.
Okay,
so,
interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any townhome units in Winston right now that D.R. Horton has done, or Kernersville?
Jeez, I would have to say there has to be some around here.
We've got some going up in Kernersville now. What is the name of that road?
Lee, would you know?
Did y'all do anything off Linville?
No, the Linville was done by another developer.
Okay. That was me.
All right. Okay, thank you.
It's escaping me. I'll think of it on
All right.
I'm sure.
Any other questions? How much time do we have left?
5 minutes.
5 minutes left for proponents. Would anyone else like to speak in support? All right, seeing no one, we will move to the opposition. I'm going to butcher this name as well. Georgian Gay and Gregory Bodovich.
Georgian Gay, 112 Watermill Road, Kernersville, NC, 27284. My husband and I live in the 4th house down on Watermill Road. If you can, you can see it.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Directly behind this, I can see this land from our backyard. It will affect us tremendously. It will change everything. Yes, they have the right to develop their property. but I never envisioned 100 townhomes going in our backyard. When this land was sold with the house, it was 12 acres. And when I heard that 100 townhomes were going in there, I thought that's not possible. But now it's 25 acres. So they have purchased more land back from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. I didn't know that DOT would sell land back after purchasing it for a highway. But that seems to be what's happened, the best I can tell. I wonder why dwellings would be built this close to the new highway when that land was purchased to keep it away from there. I'm not a developer, I don't work for DOT, I don't know. But it doesn't seem wise to have the highway that close to dwellings, to me. There's only one entrance that's proposed for this. That's 100 homes with one way in, one way out. We live in the next development over, which is Hastings Hill Farm. I honestly don't know how many homes are in our area, but probably 150, I'm guessing. We have a main entrance in, but there's two other ways that we can come into our property. A couple of years, about 3 years ago, there was a very large tree that fell on Hastings Hill Road. Couldn't get in, but emergency vehicles were able to come in the other two ways. There's a lot of traffic. There's a high school right up the road. There's Sedge Garden Elementary down the road. There's a tremendous amount of traffic, plus people going down Hastings Hill to get to 421. To say that that's a small road, please come and drive it. I wonder if a traffic study was done about this area. And I don't understand why townhomes would have less traffic than single-family homes. That doesn't make sense to me, but I don't understand that part.
All the single people, yes. No kids.
I wonder what'll be planted along the buffer zone and what it'll look like from our backyard, what it'll do to our property values. We live in a very nice, quiet neighborhood, and we'd like for it to stay as nice as it can be. And it does sound like this looks like a good development, but it will change our area drastically. I never envisioned multiple family homes there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Gay or thoughts? All right.
9 minutes.
We have 9 minutes left.
I'm Greg Badovic, 116 Watermill Road. I'm 27824, whatever it is. 284, sorry about that. I live in the fifth house down. I'm next door neighbor to the Gays. My concerns are the long-term pollution. When you're talking about noise pollution, you're talking about light pollution that we currently don't have today. It's a field. I mean, it's a field and it's woods and it's everything like that. But also concerned about the animal wildlife there. You can go in the backyard, there's wild turkeys that are back there all the time. There's deer that are back there all the time. There's owls you can hear if you sit on your back porch at night. You can hear all that. My concern will be, that's one of my concerns will be when you build all these buildings in there, you're going to have light pollution because you're now going to have lights. You're not going to be able to see the stars anymore. And I know we all say that, you know, you move to the country to see the stars and still see, but you're not going to be able to head anymore. But also the noise. You're going to have the noise. But the long-term thing is going to be the traffic. I encourage anybody to go out there and drive on those two main throws, Hastings Hill Road and Kernersville Road. When I go to work in the morning, there's probably 20 to 25 cars coming from Hastings Hill trying to turn onto Kernersville Road, and it takes you an extra 10, 15 minutes just to get out there. And you're gonna have another 100 new townhouses in there. I just don't see how the traffic's gonna be. And then on Kernersville Road, when I come home at night, I have to go all the way up to the Lowe's. It starts back up all the way to the Lowe's, and it takes me 15 to 20 minutes to get up to Hastings Hill Road to be able to turn. Now you're gonna have all this additional traffic out there. I just don't see how you're gonna be able to, cure the traffic issues. And those are the concerns that I have for what's going on out there. And I originally moved out there because of the woods and everything that was behind the house in the beginning. I mean, I moved there 3 years ago, and that was one of the selling points for me. If this goes through, I'll probably end up having to move.
Any
That's all I have.
questions,
Thank you.
thoughts? Thank you.
7 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have 7 minutes left for anyone else who would like to speak in opposition. All right, seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the limit when there's only one means of egress?
Ironically enough, 100. So that gets back to Mr. Bryan's question earlier. Technically, I believe they probably could get a few more units out there, but one of the limiting factors is fire access. If you don't have a second means of ingress and egress, you would have to sprinkler the buildings. Currently, townhomes are allowed, they have firewalls, and I believe they're allowed to be constructed under single-family construction, which does not require sprinklers. The only way they could go over that 100 unit, and again, I mean, this is my understanding, the only way they could go over that 100 unit threshold would be to either provide a second means of ingress and egress or sprinkle the buildings. If you look at the location map, if you could go back to that real quickly, there's only one opportunity for a connection, and it is along Watermill Road. But if you'll see where that stub is located, it stubs into a stream. And that's the only place where they would ever be able to connect to anything because they're surrounded by the Beltway on one side. The development to the south has no stub going to the north. And the only stub, and again, that stub may not be there anymore. Whenever I look at the particulars of the site plan, I actually don't even see that stub shown on there when you look to the east. But again, you would get into stream crossings and other things, so there's not really any practical way to go over 100 units without sprinkling the building. So I believe that's the magic number of 100 is how that was arrived at.
Thank you.
There was a little conversation here earlier, but why is there less traffic for single family than townhome?
I heard Mr. Farabee speculating about that, and he's 100% absolutely correct that just due to the occupant mix of multifamily, there's going to be more single folks, more childless couples, things of that nature, whereas single family, you're more likely to have more occupants in the house, and especially children, which for those of us who've had kids or have grown kids and remember what it was like, there's lots of ferrying them to various places along the way. So definitely that's the reason for that reduced trip generation for a townhome project.
And keep in mind, it's a transportation engineer document, and it's based on statistical analysis. So I mean, again, they look at their sample size and they come up with it based on the type of uses, or wherever they're getting their samples from. But generally speaking, for it to be statistically relevant, they have to have a certain number geographically dispersed throughout the country. And again, it's statistics. I mean, you could have a townhome theoretically that had, parents with 6 kids that were all, for some reason of driving age, they were all living there. I mean, theoretically, you could have that many people living there, but just as easily, you could have 100 units that only had one person living there and one vehicle. So again, it's just looking at it from a statistical standpoint.
Okay, public hearing is not closed. I saw your hand. Yes, sir. But if you could come back up here, because we still have time for opposition.
It's my understanding these are going to be 3- and 4-bedroom townhouses. So to the point where you're going to have single occupancy in there, I don't see it. You're going to have somebody's going to buy a 4-bedroom townhouse and have only one person living in it. So I mean, from my understanding, it's going to be 3- and 4-bedroom townhouses. So you're going to have additional cars, you're going to have additional traffic.
Okay.
And again, the roads can't handle that as it is currently. Currently, they can't handle it now. I don't see how they're going to be able to handle it with the additional traffic. So if you have 100 townhouses and you have to average of 2 cars a house, it's 200 cars.
Again, as Chris alluded to, it's statistically based, and certainly we've seen townhomes in other parts of the county that I can tell you have 3, some have 4 bedrooms. If you look at areas like Griffith Road or areas on Country Club or places like that, just kind of anecdotally from my experience with those areas, you do have a mix of families, but the preponderance is folks who are kind of, single folks, couples, and, you may have someone who has relatives who come over and use those bedrooms occasionally, like grown kids, or they may want it as an office or things of that nature. But again, the ITE manual that we get these numbers from isn't to say that every townhome community is going to have that same trip generation rate, but it is a statistically valid average.
All right, thank you. All right, how much time left for opposition?
Well,
Because we still had a little time left. If not, I'm going to declare the public hearing
it was 7 minutes, but.
All right. So if no one else would like to speak from opposition, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. Any thoughts or questions from the board before we go into?
You know, I'd just like to sort of address the opponents on this. 25 years ago, when we saw this beltway come through, we knew that there was going to be major changes for these rural areas. And this could be a commercial development around this intersection, or it could be residential. In my view, people are moving to smaller type housing and apartments, and they want to be closer to those entrances to get on those highways and then go into wherever they're going, or they're going to work from home. And so to me, I felt like the die was cast on this 25 years ago in this area. And I know that some of you probably moved there more than 25 years ago, but I was certainly in the midst of being a proponent for the Beltway at that time, and I knew what kind of effect it was going to have on the county. And so I saw this coming, I guess I would say, from my sense. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it occurs to me every time we have a case like this that it would be great if NCDOT was forced to send somebody to sit somewhere around this table and listen and answer questions about traffic and traffic counts and load capacities on roads. The unfortunate fact is that the way the development system works, the folks that are in charge of building the roads and how big they are and how many lanes they have are not the folks sitting up here. And so we have to try to make the best decisions we can about what's best for the community from a development perspective based on the road network that's there, but also the other demands that the community has. And this one actually hits very close to home for me. I'm from this side of the county. I'm fairly certain that about 150 years ago, some of my ancestors actually owned this property. They haven't for many, many years, in the interest of full disclosure. But the comments about wildlife, I mean, you know, as an outdoorsman, I relate to that. As a member of the Kernersville community, I relate to the changes that you're experiencing. And we all want our version of our hometown to stay the way it is. And unfortunately, as you look around this part of the state and this part of the country, the unfortunate fact in some respects is it just is not going to happen. As much as we would like for it to, development is going to continue to occur as our economy grows. And we have to make the best of that development. And I think this is an instance where the developer has done a good job. I know as a nearby resident, you may not see that, but they did preserve a lot of open space, and they did try to work within the topography. Again, we're trying to make the best of what's not always an optimal situation, and I think that's the case here. But I certainly understand the concerns that have been raised. But I think the developer's done a good job.
Very well said. Any other thoughts? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposes? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F-1620.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. That is unanimous. Motion passed.
I apologize, but I need y'all to add the condition.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, so I wrote it down,
I saw it.
I think I just, so that our recommendation is based on adding the 20-foot overlay buffer condition. referred to in the presentation.
Previous motion with addition, still motioned and second. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. It is unanimous.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the last item on the agenda as far as cases goes, case B7, that's UDO CC 17, and Steve Smotherman will give that presentation probably just in a second as we wait for some folks to clear out.
It was long, right? That's everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though when I stand up, I clear out a room and.
Or a football coach.
Anyways, I'm here to present very briefly about UDO CC 17, and that's a text amendment that staff has proposed in response to the City Council's Public Works Committee concerns related to the possible harmful impacts of selected chemical and battery manufacturing users to surrounding neighborhoods, the potential of these manufacturing uses to degrade nearby air and water quality, as well as the built environment, and possible mitigation of potential impacts of these select uses to off-site areas. As far as background, everyone knows the Winston Weaver plant fire in early 2022 this year led the staff to assess the city's current zoning and land use regulations for such facilities. And we researched how North Carolina peer cities address fertilizer plants through zoning restrictions and other requirements. We looked at many cities, but the peer cities that were most pertinent were Charlotte, Durham, Fayetteville, Greensboro, and Raleigh. And we found that the fertilizer plants are only allowed in the community's heaviest industrial zoning district, that they're usually classified as some form of chemical or high impact or hazardous manufacturing use. The additional use restrictions that we saw included special use permit approval, enhanced setbacks from residential areas, perimeter security wall or fence, hazardous materials management plan, and water supply watershed restrictions. And this is a table, I'm not going to go over it, but this shows the specific uses from the restrictions from each of the peer cities. Our current UDO regulates fertilizer plants as chemical manufacturing based on the North American Industrial Classification System, or NAICS, chemical and battery manufacturing of two of 13 uses classified as manufacturing C, which are only allowed in the general industrial district, which is our most intensive industrial district in our ordinance, and any use involving the manufacture of hazardous materials are prohibited within 1 mile of Salem Lake by current watershed protection regulations. So our proposed use-specific standards will apply to chemical manufacturing uses that may involve ammonium nitrate, which everyone knows was involved in the fertilizer plant fire. So we've restricted it to pesticides, fertilizer, and agricultural chemical manufacturing, and to explosives and pyrotechnics manufacturing, of which ammonium nitrate can be a very common ingredient. The other uses are battery manufacturing uses that may involve lithium or other elements that may have significant impacts to the environment and surrounding area. We want to be clear that these use-specific standards shall only apply to new manufacturing uses in the select chemical and battery manufacturing categories permitted after the effective date of the ordinance amendment. So any uses in these areas that have structures that are still standing will not be subject to these regulations. So the specific use conditions are that the
These uses are only permitted in the general industrial GI district, that the approval process requires approval of a special use zoning district, which is different from a special use permit. The special use zoning district means that anyone that wants to do a new chemical or battery manufacturing use will have to apply for GIS zoning and not just general use GIS. And when they do that, they'll have to propose, as you've seen with the special use rezonings tonight, they have to provide an accompanying site plan, which they shall be tied to. And it also allows for public hearing before both the planning board and city council, and that any applicant will have to have a neighborhood meeting with the surrounding area. We also require that there be compliance with all applicable local, state, and federal laws, that they submit a hazardous materials management plan shall be submitted for approval prior to the issuance of a building permit. The other restrictions are that they will not be allowed at all within the Salem Lake surface water supply watershed, that the minimum site size will be 25 acres for these uses, which is a significant requirement. Second significant requirement is that all facility operations shall be set back from exterior property lines a minimum of 400 feet, which is close to the length of a city block, and that means around all four sides, those operations should be close to a city block buffer on all four sides. Now, parking areas can be within 100 feet of adjoining property lines, which also meshes with the largest width buffer yard that we allow, and that shall exclude, just to be clear, it excludes any loading or unloading areas associated with the manufacturing operations. Finally, the security wall or fence shall be a minimum of 6 foot high and shall enclose all facilities from the exterior property lines. Landscaping shall be the standard landscaping provisions, except any landscaping that's adjacent to a street yard, though it may be far away, shall have the landscaping on the outside, so the public will see the buffering of the plant, of the trees to buffer the fence a little bit better. And with that, staff recommends approval of this ordinance amendment.
And before we have comments, I'd like to commend staff. I've continued to say that I feel like we as a planning board we were placed in a very unique position. And I've stated that in many meetings. So I think we've had many revisions, sending it back to you all countless numbers of times. So I think we've come to a pretty good space. So thank you again for your work and responding to emails and questions and concerns over and over again from all of us up here.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll open it up for any comments or thoughts before we make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, we do, I know there's no one that signed up, but we do need, again, obviously we can have discussion at any point, but we do need to hold a public hearing and eventually close it.
All right. I think everyone left on the last case, but is there anyone here who would like to speak on behalf of this case? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. Anyone?
Well, this process has caused me a lot of work. I've listened to a lot of neighborhoods talk about it, a lot of neighbor concerns about it. I happen to run in a group of engineers who are my friends, who deal with this stuff on a daily basis and who are hired to come in and solve these kinds of things. And so talking with them and trying to understand it from that. And as I've said to this group before, zoning is probably the tiniest bit of how we can control what we're worried about here, which is safety to the public. But we're trying to do that, right, and we're put in that position with that. My hope had been that the city would see other services, such as the fire marshals, our own code inspection folks, the water folks, come up with new policies and procedures that would help public safety when it comes to situations like this. There's no doubt in my mind that this will help certain situations in the future. It'll protect us in certain ways. And probably the best thing about it is the special use that's attached to it, because it really, and I know Council Scipio is here, it will take it in front of the council, and the council will have to look at it with their own eyes and see it in front of it and make a decision on it. And that's probably one of the best things that will come out of this. But on the other hand, this won't even stop Weaver from rebuilding in this site, even though that's highly unlikely. So I feel like there's more that we could do in this area, and I've expressed this in text to the city staff and then to the group here, and I just want to go through those as we talk about those. First of all, this leaves out storage-only types of hazardous waste, and from talking to engineers, that is often the most dangerous type of situation that you get into. Secondly, the scope of what is dangerous is very limited in this UDO 17. Thirdly, this doesn't address rail storage, and we've been told over and over again that we can't do anything about rail storage, but it doesn't attempt to address rail storage of hazardous materials. Fourthly, it's not an attempt to deal with sites that are grandfathered. And I know we have problems with sites that are grandfathered, but some attempt to try to get to those grandfathered sites is what would really protect public here in our city and in our county. Fifth, this doesn't provide 400 feet for the Weaver situation would not have been enough. We already know that. On the other side of that, which is my sixth point, this ordinance is not nuanced enough to allow dangerous types of organizations to provide, or businesses to do work that aren't going to cause large explosions or things like that. And I wish it was a way that it could be nuanced so that we wouldn't be excluding certain industries that could come to our community along the way. Seventh, the expertise of our fire marshals is not worked into this, and I can only hope that the city council, when they make decisions about this, will call up the fire marshals and ask them. It is the fire marshals that I've discovered in running businesses in town that come into my business every single year. They are the ones that have the local knowledge about what's dangerous and what's not dangerous, and should be providing that front line of defense for the public in the midst of this. And lastly, if you noticed as a trend with us in the planning board, we've allowed more residential in mixed-use situations. As we do that, and we allow residentials to be closer to where businesses have been and are grandfathered, we do not know, is that business potentially dangerous or not? And that concerns me. It should concern the public. That is what happened in the Weaver situation. People built next to something that was dangerous, and I don't want us to see in planning make that mistake as we continue down the road with this. So I really think we could do more. I think it's in the city council's hands to come up with a lot more than this little CC 17 in terms of protecting the public. If it ends up that this is the only thing that's done to protect the public after Weaver fertilizer, we have fallen way short of what we should do for the public. Thank you.
I may have asked this in a work session, I can't remember. Did staff look at all at how many sites would even meet these requirements throughout the county?
We did, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was anywhere from 40 to 60 at least, either already zoned general industrial sites or sites that are recommended for industrial in our various plans. And that number could be low, but for some reason, that's what sticks out in my mind.
I went back and checked it. There are 30 areas that have 25 acres that are currently zoned general industrial. Now, they may not, though, we don't know how,
Sure.
if any of them are available.
Well, and not only that, but that's just one requirement. When you start looking at topography and everything else and all the setbacks, I would hazard a guess that there's even fewer than that you could actually construct a viable facility on.
And
that's my concern.
And please deduct even more for the lack of sewer.
Right. So, I mean, to George, I think it was George's point 6 about limiting potential future, economic development. I mean, I hear George's concerns, and I don't disagree with them. I mean, we got to keep people safe, but the flip side of it is, particularly on the battery side of things, the technology is evolving so rapidly that I agree that there's not enough nuance there, and I'm hopeful that eventually we may revisit this, particularly with the battery angle, because what are they building down in Montgomery County? A big old battery plant, right? And yeah, it's out in the middle of nowhere, but you're going to see development around that as well. I think as we shift to more battery-driven stuff in the future, battery manufacturing is going to come back around, and we need to be prepared to deal with that. Hopefully, it'll be safer by the time we do. So,
And I also think the housing that will develop around something like that is different than the housing that we're referring to now. I think Scott Sexton, I don't know if I can call his name, but I thought he did a great article summarizing, what happened. But so I agree with you, but I think the housing would definitely be different around those sites. George, you did some great summary, by the way. I must applaud you for that. Thank you. All right. Anyone else would like to speak regarding this case? If not, what is the pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board recommend approval of UDO CC 17.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by anyone?
Me.
Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Guess this goes, if it passes, all goes to the city council, as you said. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Okay, that, 2. Thank you so much. All right, next order of business is our staff report.
Yeah, just let me get this last note. All right, got that last note down?
That was Mr. Bryan and Ms. Smith.
Yes, thank you. I got that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman of the Board, just a few items under staff report. First of all, I'll turn to Brian Wilson, who will give just a brief overview of our November caseload for your November 10th, 2022 meeting.
College court. Oh, my God.
it will never go away. It just keeps coming back.
I thought you were taking the cottage court off as well.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. That is the incorrect case number, so I just said once you get the wrong case number. That's the continued case from tonight. You'll have one continued case from this evening. 4 new rezoning requests, 2 of which are general use requests, 1 site plan amendment, this subdivision out in the county, and they're changing some access. 1 new preliminary subdivision request, and 2 planning board reviews, cottage court request and a planned residential development request. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there'll also be another text amendment before you this month.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and Board, the next item will be a overview of your October work session by Kirk.
All right. Good evening again, everyone. To not keep you guessing about that text amendment that Brian just mentioned, it's going to be, some of you all may remember about probably 16 years or so ago at this point, we did a text amendment for older commercial buildings in growth management areas 1 and 2 to make them more useful. That change of uses could occur without meeting current parking requirements so long as no existing parking on site was removed. That's been used a lot, but the one exception to that There was at least one council member who felt strongly that restaurants should not be allowed to take advantage of that privilege due to concerns about spillover parking into neighborhoods and things of that nature. So this board has been required, along with city council, to review and approve parking reductions for restaurants in those older commercial districts. Staff has seen over the last 16 years or so that this has been used, and we're not aware of any time that this group or the city council has denied those requests, and we're not aware of any concerns. So in an effort to kind of continue facilitating redevelopment of those sites, we are going to be recommending that that special exception be stricken from the ordinance, and we treat restaurants the same as any other change of use. So we'll have a briefing on that. And the only other item on your last work session of the year, Deputy City Attorney Jerry Contos is going to talk to you about neighborhood conservation overlays and NCGS 160D, the new land use enabling legislation that you passed last summer at the request of Mr. Bryan, and I think you'll find that an illuminating discussion.
Thank you.
Prepare to be.
Are we going to take the amendment that was proposed by Wes Kimbrell to October work session? I told him we were going to do that, and I didn't.
I mean, again, we can discuss that internally. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman of the Board, the only, again, one important note that Kirk did have was, again, keep in mind that October will be your last work session of the year due to the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. So we will meet on the 27th, and then you'll just have your zoning meeting in November and December before the new year. Two other items that I did want to mention, just for those who would like to attend, it's open to the community. The Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership is having their annual meeting at the Benton Convention Center on the 26th of October at 8 a.m., kind of a state of the kind of downtown projects. I believe the mayor will be speaking at that. The other item of note is that there will be a marker unveiling on Saturday, the 29th of October for the Walltown Freedman School. Marker unveiling, if you want any additional information on that, that information should be pushed out via social media. There should be information on our website, but if you'd like more specifics, we have that available. And finally, just as a quick update, over the course of the fair, we did have a booth at the fair where we were seeking, contact information and some high-level input on the comp plan as far as what were things that folks did like about our community, what would they like to see the community be like in the year 2045. That was very successful. I think our staff manned, I think we had over 80 to 100 hours in that booth over the course of the fair. So again, we have begun the soft rollout. There'll be some other staff this weekend that will be at the International Village downtown, and there's actually an event in Walkertown as well. So we'll be at both of those events this weekend, and then, we'll also be seeking avenues to do other soft input feedback over the next several months. And we're also in the process of working on the survey, trying to get the survey platform up and running, et cetera. So again, work continues to go on the comp plan at this point.
Chris, you any idea when the council will get the case we just finished?
Generally speaking, what happens is that will go back to their committee. It will go back to, generally it would go to Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee. In this case, since it's both, text amendments generally go to that committee, but the Public Works Committee has served as the task force. It may go to both. I imagine that they will get that in, we haven't passed the deadline for October yet, have we? I mean, for November.
Yeah.
More than likely, it would go to them in November.
So will you find out before it goes, or will you know what's on the docket? My question is, could you email us and let us know in case some of us would like to sit?
Yes. Yeah.
If you could do that, that would be
We make note of that.
Yes.
appreciative.
Yes, but we certainly can. But I imagine it would be November. Now, keep in mind that the November council schedule is a little bit different because of the work session, their second meeting of the month would have fallen on the week of Thanksgiving. So The zoning meeting in November is actually on Tuesday, October 1st, so that means the work session will be on the 8th and 9th of November.
Councilmember Scipio is shaking her head, so, but if you would let us know for sure, that would be good. All right. And thank you again, Councilmember Scipio, for sitting in. Before we close, I do want to thank our new audience of one. Ms. Dunnigan is probably watching right now. We were joking about that. So our audience has increased, our live audience. So thank you again, Ms. Dunnigan, for that.
There go the Nielsen's.
Is there anything else for the good of the order?
One comment.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, we all know how great planning staff is and everything else, but Chris has purview over another department too, and that's inspections. So I rather infrequently work with folks in inspections.
All right.
And specifically Rebecca Guerin, I believe is correct, and Jamie Rowe and Tracy Phillips, I've recently had an opportunity to work with, and you can really tell that there's been an emphasis placed on customer service and, responsiveness and things like that. So I just wanted to give a, big thumbs up for that. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. And anytime we get kudos, always make sure to pass that along to our staff, because again, compensation is important, but that's not the only thing. And, doing a good job and being recognized for doing that's always important. So I appreciate all the positive feedback.
Chris's face was priceless. He didn't know what you were about to say. He didn't know where it was going when you said that.
Not at this time of
I
night.
can say, I can also add having real positive experiences with the staff. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Anything else for the good of the order?
we'll have our motion to adjourn.
Second. All right. We are
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.